Okay, I'm going to make a start. So, very good afternoon to everybody. Um, what I want to do today is to talk a little bit more about bank capital. Now, I think by this point, you've had a number of lectures and you hear all these terms: tier one capital, tier two capital, capital adequacy ratio, additional capital. What else? TLAC, TLAC, COCO. It could be quite overwhelming, and I'm going to try and tell you some stories of what I saw happening. I was right in the middle of all this, and try to relate to you. Number one, what's really been happening in global banking in the last 10 years or so. And then, so what's happened to the tail end? So now we are week number 4. It's already October. Isn't it incredible? So we have just 1/4 of the year left. No problem. Yeah. Even if you don't catch it now, at the end of the class, it will be flashed up again. Now, just to recap with you, so last time we had a look at a number of websites and statistics regarding just the risk-weighted assets, if you recall, of some banks in the United States. We had a look. First of all, we had a look at the bank capital overall, all over the world, and how it's been increasing, and also the so-called leverage ratio. Okay, the Basel version of it. Remember, okay, which is different from everybody else's, causes confusion. And then we had a look at in the United States how well the banks were capitalized. We looked at, I think it was JP Morgan, and we looked at HSBC last time. We noticed that every 6 months there is this requirement called Basel III, Pillar 3 disclosure. They really do say that. It's 118 pages. Imagine how much work that takes. And they have to report that regularly, and they're not the only bank, okay? So all banks would do that. And we took a look at their risk-weighted assets and also their capital adequacy ratios and their leverage ratios and so on. So you remember we did that last time, okay? Now, what I want to do today is to take that one step further and tell you a bit more about kind of what's been happening in banking, and what was the regulators' reaction after the Lehman Brothers collapsed and the global financial crisis, and what was bankers' reactions on that. I think it's all going to be extremely relevant to you. I will talk to you a bit about COCO, and following on that, TLAC. I think those two concepts will keep you busy for today. And we'll take it from there. Okay, now, Cherie's assignment is due sometime this month. And somebody reminded me before the class that I need to create a folder for you guys to upload. So I will do that. But in 3 days. Okay, it will be done. Okay, because it just takes me 3 minutes to create. But thank you for reminding me. Okay, so this is the topic. Okay, which you would find in all the tutorial slides. Okay, but I will do that. And then, so what else is going on? So you already had one class with Jason, and he asked me to split you guys up just to save all the logistics. So I think there are 38 people in the class. I'm going to split you guys up into 6 teams. So 4 teams will have 6 people, and 2 teams might have 7. Okay, he will ask you to work on a project with regard to a certain insurance company. Okay, so as far as the calendar is concerned, so right now we are here, and next week we should be meeting just as usual. There are no more holidays for me on a Tuesday, I don't think. There's one more holiday, but that's on a Wednesday. So we will meet here regularly from now on. And yeah, so Jason took over last week, and I hope you enjoyed his talk. Now, just some market concepts, I promise, because some of you guys wrote to me and you were asking me what these actually meant. The first one is pro-cyclicality, okay, pro-cyclical. Pro-cyclicality is the noun for pro-cyclical. People are asking me, what does that mean? You hear that a lot when people discuss the global financial crisis and the banking business models that a lot of banks use. They have this problem. They are pro-cyclical, or they have the pro-cyclicality problem. Okay, what does it mean? This word. Okay, and if you read anything on Basel or bank regulations or how bankers are running their business, you see this. Now, pro-cyclical means if you believe that business cycles are like this, okay, they won't be so uniform and neat and tidy, but if you believe that economic cycles go up and down, pretty much like the stock market, then when you are at this point, what should you do? You should look at selling. If you are a stock investor, you should sell here and you should buy here, correct? Or if you are a hedge fund, okay, you should be less aggressive, okay? And here you should be more aggressive. And in fact, this is what our old friend Warren Buffett, he keeps saying all the time. You have heard it, okay? Buy the fear, sell the greed, not the other way around, okay? You buy the greed. People are greedy when they're here. And people are fearful down at the bottom. So Warren Buffett is very fond of saying, I am greedy when other people are fearful, and I am fearful when other people are greedy. Now, it's easy to say, it's easy said than done, okay? But what people realize is that bankers, even very, very senior ones, okay, they make exactly this mistake, which is when economies are going well and you are at the top of the cycle. So if you're a fund manager, you would think that you should take the contrarian approach. But what they end up doing is, okay, apart from selling, apart from being less aggressive, okay, you probably should lend less. That makes sense, doesn't it? It's just the general idea of being conservative when you are near a market top. The problem always is, how do you know you're at the market top? Okay. In any case, so regulators accuse bankers of having this pro-cyclical bias, which is when things are good, they get more and more aggressive and they get more and more liberal with their lending and they take more and more risks, which is probably true, okay? And then when things are bad, just when the economic system really needs banks to make loans, to extend credits, the bankers are not there, okay? That, ladies and gentlemen, is what it means to be pro-cyclical, okay? Are you with me? Okay, now, you can debate, you can argue until midnight whether that is actually true or not, okay? But regulators seem to think that is the case, that bankers take more risk when markets are at a cycle top and maybe about to turn, and then bankers are very, very conservative when markets are at the bottom. It has a little bit of a kind of Robert Shiller flavor to it, you know, how he was describing, you know, markets overshooting on the way up and undershooting on the way down. It's all related in a way, okay? So they, in fact, what the regulators came up with was this thing called a counter-cyclical buffer. And you would find that cyclical buffer. In fact, this might even help you, you know, do your assignment. The idea of this is, okay, if we are in good times and you have made some money, good for you, we want you to put some of that money aside, don't touch it, okay? And it's compulsory, and you put that in this mailbox called counter-cyclical buffer, and it's supposed to be there when things go bad, okay? Is everyone okay with that? Yeah? All right, now, the second thing I want to explain to you, I hope this thing works because I'm about to turn it on. Okay, hold on a second. Oh, here we are. Okay, now, I want to just show you, this is something that Sharima shared with you in the first lecture class. And do you remember this? And now some of you were asking me what I thought of this, and it's a very typical kind of market rundown that you get when looking at fixed income. And the way you read this is you have a number of bonds that are issued by the same entity. Well, actually, they're not the same. It's HSBC Banks and HSBC Holdings PLC. I'll explain that in a moment. And there is an amount, and then there is a rating. There's a coupon. There's a spread to Treasury. And then there is a maturity, okay? And this is trading levels as at 18th of June 2020. 18. So this was just 3 months ago. And the question she was asking was, work out, take 2 minutes of your time to come up with 3 possible reasons for the difference in spreads. Okay. Now there are several things that you can say. The first one being, first of all, that the tenures are not the same. So this one is noticeably longer. So it's 3 years longer than the other 2. So because it is longer tenure, the spread to Treasury is different. Okay. Now this one is issued by HSBC Bank, and this one by the holding company. You can see that the credit ratings also are different, okay, slightly different. This one, I suspect the first one would be from S&P, second one is from Moody's, and then the last one is likely to be from Fitch. That's normally the order. Okay? S&P and Moody's being the more authoritative, and Fitch is just the little one. A number of things I can say to you. First of all, even if you don't look at HSBC Holding, if you look at just the bank, HSBC Bank, okay, a bank or a company can have an issuer, ISSUER, issuer rating, and a bond that is issued by that company or that bank also has a rating. Now, they do not have to be the same. Okay, so an issuer has a rating. The reason for that is an issue. Now, okay, first of all, what is the reason for a rating? The reason for a rating is you want, at least in theory, some kind of objective determination on the default risk of that issuer. Okay. Now, when an issuer is issuing some debt, they have senior, secure, or senior, and then they have subordinated, and so on. So different levels of debt, different levels of subordination will have different riskiness or risk of losses if you invest in that bond. So therefore, you cannot possibly expect that the senior bonds of a company to have the same credit rating as the subordinated. Okay, so an issuer rating, a corporate rating, is probably like the weighted average of all the debt that they are holding. Okay, so that's the concept. Now, the other thing to point out to you is that so this one is approximately 2 years and 2 months, isn't it? This one is 2 years and 10 months, and then this one is not quite 6 years, it's 5 years and 9 months, something like that. Okay. Now the way okay, never mind the last one. Okay, but the way you say spread to treasuries, the way they do it, I suspect, is that they will compare the yield on this bond, which is not specified, okay, to the nearest treasury security. And in the US, okay, I'll now switch back to my notebook. Okay, so and it's not just the US market, okay, this happens a lot in other markets as well. But in the US market, the key points on the Treasury curve is 2, 5, 10, and 30, okay? This is the tenor, and this is the yield. So when you saw just now spread to Treasury, now there was a bond which was 2 years and a bit, and then there's another one which is 2 years and a bit more. They are not the same maturity, okay? But if the HSBC Bank, the shorter one, was trading here, this is the yield, okay? And then the other one, which is slightly longer maturity, so let's say that one was trading here, okay? So that would be the yield of that one. Show you again. This is all very useful info for you to know. Okay, so you call this bond 1, you call this bond 2, and you never mind about bond 3, but just look at 1 and 2. Okay, so the tenors are slightly out, and one of them is has a lower spread than the other. Now, so turn back. And so what they do is quite likely they take a look at what is the actual 2 year, okay, the 2 year point for the US Treasury, the yield for the 2 year point, okay. Now, as you know, there are websites where you can very easily find out where the Treasury is the most liquid market in the world. And so this was as of closing last night. The 2 year is around 282. You can see that at the bottom, okay, 2.82% was the yield for 2 year Treasuries. And so this point is 2.82. Now, if just now the bond 1, so bond 1, the spread to Treasury, let's say it is a 2 year, so it's Treasury 2 year plus 63.5 basis points. Whereas for bond 2, it is actually Treasury plus 71 basis points. So that would make it what? 3.45%. I am simply adding 63.5 basis points to 2.82. Okay, and then this one will be plus 71, so 3.53. That is the yield. Now, you might have noticed this is a bit funny because this bond, the bond 1, actually is not a 2 year bond. I already told you it was 2 years and 2 months. This second bond also is not. It's 2 years and 8 months or 9 months. So why is it that we always pick the 2 year point? Likewise, so you have a point for the 10-year US Treasury, okay? I think if there is one number about bond markets you should remember, it's probably the yield for the US 10-year Treasury. Where is it now? 3.09, okay? It's been hovering above and below 3% for a long, long time, and the first time it touched 3%, the whole market just went crazy. Oh my God, you know, the end of the world is coming. But after a while, you just get used to it. Oh, it's 3%. Oh, okay, yeah, I'll go and have a coffee. But anyway, so my point here is these 2 year, 5 year, 10 year, and 30 year because they are very, very key and liquid and closely watched market parameters. People use them as a kind of benchmarks, which is to say, if you have a bond which is like 11 years, okay, or there is another bond which, let's say it is 9 years, okay, and let's say the 9-year bond is trading somewhere there, and then the 11-year bond is trading somewhere there. Now, when people say, okay, the 11-year bond is trading at T plus 50, they really mean that the distance between here and here is 50. You see what I'm saying? Not the distance between here and here. That was actually the question raised by one of the students in class, and I clearly remember. She said, well, it seems like you are not really comparing, equivalent risk values, because a bond could be 11 years long, okay? And then you are adding a spread where the benchmark is a 10-year bond. Do you remember that question? It was asked by Chosen, okay? Shen Yang, what her name is. She raised that point, and I think the answer was very quick. My response to you is that it is actually true what she said, okay? So when you quote, when people ask for prices in the market and someone quote you, okay, it's T plus 50, they really mean the 10-year treasury, okay? And then you look at whatever is the 10-year treasury rate, because it is so widely traded and so liquid. There's usually no argument about what the yield of, it's called a current 10, okay? So you look at the current 10, in fact, you go to a website or you go to Bloomberg, okay? US Treasury. Can you see that? I haven't even stopped typing. The current 10 already came up, okay? So you go, what is your price for the current 10? That's the US 10-year. Now, you're probably thinking, yeah, but the 10-year bond is only a 10-year bond for one day. The day it is actually issued, okay? The day after, it's not a 10-year bond anymore. It's a 9-year and 364-day bond, and so on and so forth. So fixed income has this rather fascinating feature of time decay. So what they do is actually regularly, in fact, every 3 months, they will reissue a bond, and the new one will be called current 10, okay? Or it's called on the run. On the run means it's the current bond. But anyway, so when you say Treasury plus 50, you really mean the 10-year. Now, that can be misleading because you are not exactly capturing. So this magic number is 50, okay? And if the current 10 is 3.09, as we said, okay, earlier, so I know the yield of this bond is 359, okay? But if you want to think of this number 50 as your representation of credit risk or credit premium, okay, it is not exactly correct, because the credit premium should be this part here, and 50 is probably overstating it. Do you see my point? You see my point? That was the student's question, and she made that observation, and she is correct in what she had in mind. I know what she was thinking. Now, if you go to Bloomberg, there is when you look at the page for any corporate bonds, apart from giving you the spread to Treasury, which is this number here, 50, they give you another parameter. It's called the G spread. Let's say it's 44, Let's just say it is, okay? Now, the G spread is exactly what she had in mind. The G spread would be the difference between the bond, the yield of the bond, and the 11-year point in the Treasury yield curve. Okay, that is called a G spread. So it's basically making an adjustment for that year. Is everyone okay with that? Now you might wonder, why don't we use G spreads all the time? The reason you don't is, people prefer to refer to the 2-year, 5-year, 10-year, and 30-year. It's a lot easier, and it flashes up everywhere, every day on the radio, on TV, you see it, on websites, okay? So for reference purposes, it's a lot easier. But, the credit risk actually, if you want a real credit risk, so to speak, it is another value. By the same token, you could do it for, if it was a 9-year. So now the spread to Treasury, if you use a 10-year bond to spread a 10-year Treasury to give you the spread for a 9-year bond, you are likely to be understating it, because you are just going to be talking about this part when the spread should be this part here. Are you with me? Everyone is okay? I thought I would explain that to you because it's a useful little, fixed income convention, and it may not be immediately obvious to you. Okay? Now, if you're okay with that, I thought I would draw your attention to a couple of things I picked up along the way. Are banks good at assessing credit risks? Well, they're in this business. So are they actually good at it? And I found an article in the Financial Times, which I am happy to upload. So here's a story written by Brooke Masters. I think this was a few years ago. I don't have the date on this thing. But what is she saying? Big global banks are miscalculating the risk of their balance sheet by an average of 13%, because they are so bad at predicting whether their borrowers will default. Research from Barclays has found. Barclays itself is a bank. So the report looked at 19 banks that provided data on predicted loss, actual loss against predicted loss, predicted against actual on corporate, institutional, and mortgage loans over the last 5 years, and found that banks missed the mark by an average of 54%, and one, Hang Seng, was off by 89%. I didn't know Hang Seng was a big global bank. Most of the banks were too conservative. Okay, well, thank God for that. But RBS understated the probability of default, or understated, not overstated, okay? So they underestimated. And Lloyd's understated probable default in his corporate book, mostly inherited from HBOS, that's Halifax, Bank of Scotland, by 51%. So okay, if you're an optimist, you say that the good news is most banks seem to be making the mistake on the side of caution. They are too conservative, not too aggressive. Okay. The bad news is the forecast can be error can be substantial. Okay. So I just thought I would flash that up for your interest. Okay. Now, something else to think about. So are banks actually giving us their full exposure? So there was a time when you were simply using the capital adequacy ratio, which is your Tier 1 capital over your risk-weighted assets. Now, like I have said to you before, the problem with this approach is that it doesn't tell you the size of your balance sheet. By now, you know what RWA is, right? So you adjust the risk according to how risky they are. That was when I think it was Bank of England came up first with the idea of the leverage ratio. And it's probably a good idea. So more info is better than less info. And I have another article here, the leverage story. So again, this was by Brooke Masters from the Financial Times. This was when this idea of leverage ratio was first being discussed in international banking circles, and they first of all they observed that the so banks have not done the leverage ratio willingly. They hated the idea, but the Bank of England made them do it anyway. Okay, so the capital adequacy ratio of HSBC at the time was 12.3, and RBS was around 10.3. Now that's the capital adequacy. Okay, the leverage ratio will strip out any effect of risk modeling. Risk modeling means exactly when you are reweighting them because of the different risk weights. Okay, so when you don't do that, you just take the raw dollar amounts of the assets, you get quite a different picture. So here, as of December 31st, this was a few years ago, Standard Chartered had the strongest ratio. So please remember this, in this context, having a high number is good, okay? So you want to have a really high leverage ratio if you want to tell people you are a very safe bank. So that means it has assets 22 times its capital. That's it, okay? It doesn't say what assets are in there, just assets. Barclays had the weakest with 2.8. So that means Barclays was more than 35 times leverage. Okay, so they were well known for that. They were well known for being quite undercapitalized, which was also the reason you haven't heard a lot from Barclays in recent years, because they've just been so busy repairing their balance sheet. Okay, so all the banks except Barclays were able to crawl above the 3%. So now it's around 4 or 5%. Between 4 and 5 is a big difference. If your leverage was 4%, so if your leverage ratio was 4%, how many times leveraged are you? How many times? So leverage ratio. According to Basel, 4%, okay? How many times leveraged are you? Thank you, 25 times, not percent, 25 times leverage. And if your leverage ratio was 5%, your leverage is 20 times, okay? So it does make quite a big difference. By the time you get up to 8%, and nobody is up there that I know of, you are only 12 and, well, I shouldn't say only, okay? You are 12 and a half times leverage. Okay? Is everyone okay with that? So the leverage ratio of most banks are, I think, somewhere between 3.5 to 4.5 or 5. Okay. Now, I want to just spend the rest of the time kind of relating to you what's really been happening in banking for most of last decade. So as you know, a lot of banks suffered quite serious erosion to their assets during the global financial crisis. So a big chunk of the assets had to be written off, either in the form of bad loans or mortgages or mortgage-backed securities, credit derivatives, whatever. Okay, so when you write them off, what happens? You take the loss. That's all. That's what loss absorption is all about. So you take the loss. Why do you take the loss here? Because you can. Because it is equity capital. It's not very nice, but at least you can do it. You can't take the loss up here. This is deposits from aunties and uncles, mums and dads, okay? You take the loss there, people are going to go on the street and start a revolution, okay? So you take the loss where you can take a loss, okay? And as a result, the balance sheet becomes like this. So now you have less capital, and when that happens, your risk goes up. So what regulators all over the world, and I guess they come from, after meeting in Basel, they ask the banks to recapitalize. Okay, so you issue new shares, okay? So you make sure you get back to where you were. Not only that, issue more. Okay? Not only that, issue even more. And that's kind of what's been happening all over the world for the last 10 years, if you care to look. Now, if you are a bank, you would hate to see that happen, because no one in their right mind like to issue a lot of new shares. When you issue new shares, and if you are not allowed to take the same amount of risks, or when you issue shares and they are still looking over your shoulder at what you're doing and making sure you have all the ratios correct. So what ends up happening is you have a lot more capital earning a similar amount of return, which means it would have an effect on your return on equity. Right now, what is return on equity? Return on equity is just equity, and then your return. That's return on equity, okay? Now, sorry, so if your return doesn't change a lot, but your equity keeps going up and up and up, then this whole thing will come down. You get what I'm saying? Okay, so bankers, they hated that. They really did. But they didn't have a choice, because the regulators under a lot of pressure to make sure that banks are behaving prudently. Now, so they came up with this idea of what's called a COCO. Do you know what COCO stands for? Any idea? It's not the drink you take before you go to bed, right? Not that COCO. Anyway, COCO stands for contingent convertible bond. Okay. Now I guarantee you that if you understand a little bit of this instrument, okay, one day you find yourself standing in front of it. I I've had some students, so we were discussing this in class, and then 6 months later, they already left this place and they'd gone into asset management or private banking. And they said, wow, Sam, yes, now I'm dealing in contingent convertible bonds, and thank you for telling me all that stuff. This is a class of instrument that became very, very popular after the global financial crisis. And it's been really taking off in the last 10 years or so. I think it is a sign that bankers actually are very creative people. And when there's a problem, they try to come up with a solution. And this was a solution that regulators found acceptable. Okay, now, do you know, first of all, what a convertible bond is? Do you all know? Yeah? What's a convertible bond? Sorry? A convertible bond is a bond that can be converted into shares, okay? So you imagine if you are an investor, you pay me $100 and I give you a bond. So it looks like a bond, smells like a bond, acts like a bond, pays coupons like a bond, okay? Until one day, if something happens, if something bad happens, okay, this piece of paper, originally you invested $100 with me, okay, I'm not going to pay you back $100 anymore. I might give you, let's say, 5 shares. Let's just say 5, okay? So that means I'm selling shares to you at $20 a share. Now, that is a contingent convertible. Now, maybe you're wondering, okay, what is the share price now? Doesn't matter. The share price can be 50, 60, 70, okay? It's definitely not 20, okay? So this is when, okay, the contingent convertible bond is, it looks like a bond, it pays like a bond, but one day, when things go bad, then I will have the right to turn you into a shareholder. So when you are still holding this piece of paper, well, congratulations, you are now the proud owner of 5 shares instead of 100, you know, coming knocking on my door asking for $100. Okay. Now, what that means is, so after they issued a lot of equity, so now the equity base looks like this. This is all equity, okay? And the bankers are saying, okay, enough. I can't take it anymore. And we've issued so much equity, and they really have, okay? They flooded the stock market with new issues. So the bankers say, okay, how about I issue something called COCO, contingent convertible. Now, so these are not stocks. Okay, this is not equity. This is a bond. So it's not going to cause any dilution to the equity portion. And it looks like a bond and it acts like a bond unless something seriously goes wrong with this bank, in which case it does become equity. Are you with me? Yeah? Now that is the clever part about it, okay? So you won't be a shareholder unless something really, really goes wrong. And you might be wondering, well, what do you mean something really, really goes wrong? Let me show you. Now, if you go to Cherie's slides near the end, oh, not this one. this one. There is a wealth of information in there, but I draw your attention to, I need to find it. Why don't I just look for cocoa? Okay, now this one is an example of a contingent convertible bond which was issued by Bank of China around 4 years ago. Now I'll show you how to read this thing. Okay, so first of all, it was issued almost exactly 4 years ago, and it pays it's called a dividend of 6.75%, which is fixed. Now you have to remember, we are living in a very low yielding environment these days, and it is not easy to get someone to pay you a coupon of 6.75%, let alone someone like Bank of China, okay, which is generally considered to be a very good risk. Okay, and this one is supposed to be perpetual, so it doesn't have a maturity date, but it is callable. So per NC5 means it's perpetual, non-callable for 5 years. So that tells me after 5 years, it is possible for the company to call it back. Now they may call it, they may not, okay? But if you don't call it, you're gonna have to keep paying that rather high coupon here. Now, the interesting thing is, I said to you that these bonds will convert into equity when something bad happens. What do I mean when something bad happens? Look at this one. It says trigger level, okay? Now that means the CET1 or Bank of China, probably right now the CET1 ratio would be somewhere close to 8 or 9%, maybe even higher. Okay, that is my suspicion. But if this ratio ever drops to 5.125 or below, so that means there's something seriously wrong and the bank is losing a lot of money, such that your core equity keeps dropping and dropping until it gets to 5% of your risk-weighted assets, then this bond will convert into equity. Are you with me? Okay. Now, I actually, just bear with me a second. I want to show you some more examples. Let me just try and find it. Okay. there were, okay, just give me a minute. What I have here are, maybe it's easier for you to see if I do this. Okay, so these, what I have here are a list of other banks that have also issued these so-called contingent convertibles. Sometimes they are known as additional tier 1 or AT1, okay? And now, so here's the issuer, issue date, how much, and the coupon that they are paying. So Standard Chartered issued one a few years ago at 6.5. HSBC issued another one at 6.375. It's per not NC10, so this goes on forever. But you know, after 10 years, they can call it. Now, notice the rating. I told you this one is actually rated BBB. HSBC is not a BBB bank, but this issue is a BBB issue. And then you scroll down here. The interesting thing is loss absorption trigger. Okay, so under what circumstance do I actually become a shareholder? That is when the CET1 actually drops below 7% of the risk-weighted assets. So you can see that it's quite common everywhere. Okay, now you don't have to go into too much detail, but the thing to remember is you are a bondholder on this until you are not. Until the bank gets into a serious problem such that there is a great depletion in their capital below a certain level, below that trigger, and they will have to call upon you to become a shareholder. Now, so I got friends who worked in private banking circles, and in fact, I've talked to some alumni who went into private banking, and this is the product that they sell all day and all week. The psychology, I think, is quite easy to understand. So imagine if you are an investor and you look for high yield, you want high yield, but you don't want high risk. Is that even possible? Okay, this seems to be a way where you can get a very decent looking yield. More than 5%, I would say, is quite decent. Okay, so you get a good yield, you get a good name. Okay, what are your risks? Your risk is that HSBC collapse. Your risk is Standard Chartered goes bust. Your risk is Bank of China goes down the toilet. And some investors are asking themselves seriously, what is the chance of that happening? And they are quite comfortable taking that risk. Now, you may not be comfortable taking the risk for DNB. I don't know who they are, okay? But you guys, you would be comfortable taking the risk of Bank of China, wouldn't you? I think, yeah. You see, you understand the psychology. So you want to be able to sell a product. It's not enough to understand what the product is or how it works. Okay, you have to understand what is the motivation behind people buying this kind of stuff. I know that for some private banking clients, okay, not only do they love it, okay, these products they were selling like popcorn. They leverage on that. They leverage. Now, what does it mean you leverage? Okay, so you are receiving 6.375 coupon. Okay, here, Bank of China, 6.75 coupon. So if you borrow money at LIBOR every 3 months, and then you keep refunding it. Okay, so let's say you borrow at 1.5%. Okay, so if you are 2 times leverage, you can get this times 2. So you bring a bit of your own money. Let's say you bring $100 and you borrow $100. So you're going to buy $200 worth of this stuff, okay? So based on $100, you earn 6.75 times 2 minus the money you borrow. Let's say you were paying 1.5%. Let's just say you were, okay? What are you going to get? You're going to get 13 minus 1.5. 13.5 minus 1.5. You're going to get 12%. If you invest $1 million in 1 year, you're going to get 120,000. That's the kind of risk that people were happy to take. Are you with me there? Does it make sense to you? Okay, it's worth you spending a bit of time to look into this. If ever you go to interview with a wealth management or private banking, you talk about cocoa, they will know. They know what this is all about, and they would be quite surprised, and maybe not surprised, but quite impressed that you know about this. Okay? Now, if you're okay with that, I want to get on to the next concept, which is on TLAC. TLAC. Okay? Now, I think, someone was asking me about this the other day. I want to clarify. I looked into it. Deferrable versus non-cumulative. So let me just clarify on this, okay? When an instrument is deferrable, it means that that instrument can actually miss payments, or when it can miss payments on that instrument on specific payment dates, and it would not actually be a default. Okay, now being in default is very serious. Okay, you don't want to do that. If you issue a bond, a senior coupon bond, then you absolutely, it's not deferrable. Okay, but when now a deferrable instrument can be cumulative or non-cumulative. Okay, so deferrable cumulative instrument means that if you miss a payment, then the payment will be paid on the next day. Okay, I can't pay you this time, I'll pay you next time. Okay. A deferrable non-cumulative instrument means a missed payment will not be paid, will not need to be paid at all. Okay. Equity is an example of that. Okay, so you don't pay dividend, it's not good, but not much they can do about it. Okay. Now, TLAC, do you know what that stands for? Total loss absorption capacity. Okay, thank you. Now, this idea was, I think, partly a new development after things like cocoa started cropping up. And it was first conceived, which is not spelled correctly, in 2013 when the G20 nations actually had a meeting in Russia. And the idea was simply that apart from knowing how much tier 1 and tier 2 capital a bank has, they want to have an additional requirement for what are called global systematically important banks. Now, the requirement is that they want to know how much additional capital there is which can take losses. I will explain to you in a moment what that actually means, okay? Now, senior debt obviously cannot take any losses, okay? You give me $100 to buy a senior bond. On the due date, I have to give it back to you. If I have a big loss, I can't ring you up and say, oh, I'm sorry. I know you lent me $100 on a senior basis, but would you mind if I just pay you back 80? I can't do that, okay? So senior bonds cannot take losses. But some classes of, hybrid instruments, such as contingent convertibles, however, they may be able to, okay? And some regulators decided that they want to know what is the total loss absorption capacity of big banks. Now, I'll give you an example, a very simple example. So, okay, we can use this one. Let's say I want to just keep it simple. I'll look at the entire balance sheet, okay? So let's say your equity, so this is X1, this is X2. Now, so you have X1 is just maybe your tier 1 and tier 2 combined. Okay, let's just say it is. And here you have issued some CoCo. Now, at the beginning, this is just a bond like any other ones. So they're not actually taking any losses, but it can. And let's say you have a real disaster, okay, in your hands, like Lehman Brothers Part 2, and suddenly your asset size becomes like this. It's very serious, okay? But if you were to convert these CoCo guys to shareholders, okay, then at least you still have some equity here. But all of that will be completely wiped out. But anyway, before that happens, so we know that these CoCo bonds can take losses. And let's say this one, X1 is 6%. And let's say the CoCo would add another 1%. Okay, so this, I call it Y. Okay, so what I mean to say is, if X1 over Y is 6%, and X2 over Y was, let's say, 7%, I'm really just making this up. The numbers don't matter. Now, regulators want to know how much extra loss absorption capacity you have. In this case, it is 1%, okay? It is precisely this stuff here. So when you simply look at the capital adequacy ratio, when you look at those numbers, the additional capacity to take losses, that may not show up, which is unfair for bankers as well. Maybe they have planned for this, but it won't show up in those numbers. When you look at the TLAC ratios, they will show up, okay? Is everyone okay with that? Yeah? Now, so I made some more comments on the next page. So TLAC ratio is calculated by dividing what are called TLAC eligible instruments. So those things like CoCo and pref shares, where they are capable of taking losses, they will be classified as TLAC eligible financial instruments. Okay. divide that by the size of the balance sheet, the actual size as well as the risk-adjusted size. Okay, so you have two numbers. So typically, these instruments, these TLAC eligible instruments, are deeply subordinated. So repayments can be deferred. It could be deferred forever. Okay, you don't get paid, and this would include a lot of what I call contingent claims. Contingent convertibles is one type of contingent claims. Okay, the claim depends on contingencies. Okay, they look and they act like debt until certain conditions are triggered, at which, sorry about all these typing errors. I didn't check it before I should have done, before I published, at which point they become equity. Okay, now it raises the idea of bail-in versus bailout, okay, where a bank that is in distress is actually going to be saved by the internal funds or the investors who originally invested in it. Maybe they invested in cocoa bonds or preference shares or perpetuals and so on, rather than waiting for the government to actually come to their rescue. That's what bailout is. Okay. Now, I think you bail someone, you bail them out. Bail-in, grammatically, I've never heard of that in English until recently. Okay, but they want to contrast. The preposition for bail should be out. You know what a preposition is? Huh? I go to, I come from, I bail out. Okay, bail should be followed by, but anyway, they come up with this idea of bail-in. And the idea is precisely that. So when a bank is in trouble, instead of asking for the government, okay, you look to your bondholders to see what kind of hybrid instruments that they have, which can take additional losses. So these guys now become shareholders. It means that they will not get their money back in the form of a bond. Okay, I mean, you have not completely taken away their claim on you. It's just the claim has now changed from a debtor to a shareholder. Now that's a very important change. Okay, so a debtor, $100 is $100. Par, I give you par, you give me par back. Okay, very simple to understand. If you are a shareholder, you have 5 shares. How much is that worth? 5 times whatever is the share price. Okay, could be $1, could be 5 cents, could be $2,000. Who knows? Okay, so that's a very important difference. So that's what people mean by bail-in, which is an interesting term. Now I've actually got not here. So after they had a meeting in St. Petersburg, the G20 actually asked the regulators to come up with some proposals, and they came up with a term sheet. I always find that funny. Term sheets are when you are doing deals in an iBank. That's when you issue a term sheet. But the Financial Stability Board issued a term sheet on what TLAC is and who needs to observe that. And you can feel free to look into this, because this is all related. This is related to all the contingent claims like preference shares and callable perpetuals and contingent convertible bonds and so on. So who needs to do it? And what are the objectives? What are the parameters and so on? Okay. It's not the most exciting document I've seen, but it does tell you something. Okay. Relationship with capital requirements. Okay, I just want to give you a brief overview. If you want to know more, I think it's better you dig deeper into it yourself. Okay, so I will upload these documents for your interest. I think now that we have talked about this, if I play this video, which is only 3 minutes, it should make more sense to you, hopefully. Okay, so I'll do that. Hey, give me some sound.
That was energy and therefore should obtain limit rather than the taxpayer. Benefit should be referred to them.
All I heard was unfair. Okay, here we go.
During the financial crisis, several banks awarded bankruptcy thanks to state aid. Public opinion found it unfair. Banks, equity and debt holders should obtain limit rather than the taxpayer. Bail-in should be referred to bail-out. Several regulatory initiatives were undertaken in response. Basel III, the creation of resolution frameworks, BRRD, including MREL and TLAC.
Okay, that's what we're talking about.
In Europe, the BRRD introduced the bail-in tool, which allows resolution authorities to haircut or convert liabilities into equity to absorb losses in accordance with the insolvency priority order.
Now, that's exactly what I was trying to tell you when the COCO bonds, when they convert under certain conditions. Okay, that's what she's referring to. Okay.
FSB agreed global standard, TLAC, setting the amount of bail-inable instruments that globally systemic important banks are required to maintain. As of 2019, the greater of 60% of their risk-weighted assets, or 6% of the leverage exposure. As of 2022, the greater of 18% of RWAs, or 6.75% of the leverage exposure.
Okay, now it's worth stopping here briefly. So the requirement is in 4 years' time, when you add your Tier 1 and Tier 2 capital, and when you add all these other instruments that can take losses, okay, but they look like bonds on day one, they should be equal to 18% of the risk-weighted assets. That's actually a lot, or at least 6.5% of your entire balance sheet. Okay, so this 6.75 is like Tier 1 plus Tier 2, thank you, yeah, plus all these other funny-looking instruments that look like bonds but can one day become shares. Okay, so when you add them all up, okay. So if your leverage ratio itself is already 6.75, you're doing very well. I don't think any bank is there. Okay. Okay.
TLAC-eligible instruments should meet strict criteria. In particular, structured notes and secured liabilities will be excluded liabilities.
Okay, so not everything can be TLAC eligible. So you have to make sure that the instruments you issue can take some losses without triggering a default, and obviously structured notes is not in that category. Okay?
The precise definition of structured notes is still awaited. TLAC subordination is achieved in different ways. In the US and UK, most banks are organized to issue TLAC instruments from the holding company and structured products from the operating company. In Germany, the law facilitates the immediate compliance with TLAC requirements. Thanks to a junior...
Notice the way, sorry for interrupting, the way they do it like a pyramid. I don't do it like a pyramid, I do it like a balance sheet. And then they turn it upside down, so when you're up there, okay, that's actually the high risk. So very, very high risk. So this is Tier 1 and Tier 2. So this together, T1, T2 would be your capital adequacy ratios, and then whatever this is, okay, these are instruments that hopefully can take some losses. They have not taken any losses right now, but they can, okay? So you count them in your loss absorption capacity, okay?
Mention of existing vanilla senior unsecured debt. In Italy, all deposits have been preferred. In France, a new class of debt, the senior non-preferred, is created between the subordinated debt and the current senior unsecured debt. GSIB should respect a new TLAC ratio. TLAC instruments will have a higher yield than non-TLAC instruments. Issuance of structured products will be impacted. Indeed, some issuers may have limited funding needs on top of TLAC requirements. And regulation continues to evolve. The European Commission is currently analysing the potential harmonisation of TLAC and MREL across Europe.
Okay, now, so that we don't get too carried away and lose sight of what's going on, it is worth, I think, taking one step back and try and figure out just exactly who are these global systemically, not systematically, systemically important banks, okay? So who are we actually talking about? Doesn't look like we have a list for 2018. I'll take 2017, okay? List of global systemically important banks. Who are these guys? So let's take a look. So in alphabetical within each bracket, global systemically important banks as of November 2017 allocated to buckets corresponding to required levels of additional capital buffer. What does that mean? So I think different banks need to have different levels of additional capital to meet requirements, additional requirements. So JP Morgan Chase needs an additional 2.5%. But anyway, these are the banks, okay? So BOA, basically any bank, a lot of these, you would have heard of all of them, I'm sure. Barclays, BNP, CCB, Goldman Sachs, ICBC, Mitsubishi, UFJ, Wells Fargo. I don't say that these are good banks. They are certainly big banks, okay? And they all have, substantial international presence. ABC. So the big four are all there, right? ABC, CCB, ICBC, and BOC. Credit Suisse, is UBS in there? Yes, near the bottom. Sumitomo, State Street, Standard Chartered, and so on. You get the idea? Yeah? So one day, if you're ever invited to go over there for a chat, okay, know who you are dealing with. Do you have any questions you want to ask me? I think I'll stop there. And anyway, I prefer you ask me questions in the public, and I'll try and answer them in the public. So Cherie's assignment, I will create an assignment folder for you, as I said. Anyone wants to ask me anything? Any comments? Anyone? Any questions? I think it's good to have this understanding because it really helps you to appreciate what is going on in the world of finance, which in turn has, an impact on your job prospects. Okay. If you don't have any questions, I'm going to have to go. And anyone? If you want to ask me something, I prefer you do so openly, and then I can share the answer with everyone. Anybody? Yes. The call structure. Okay. Okay, she asked me, so with something like this, for example, if we take the Bank of China issue, so this one is permanent non-call 5. Now, and then you look at the one Standard Chart, not Standard Charter, this one. This one is also permanent NC5. So that means the perp means perpetual. So that means there's no maturity date. Okay, now the problem with that is if I issue something to you and you buy it and it's a perpetual, the problem is I will be paying for it forever. Okay, it will never end. And in order that there can be an end date, okay, so I'm going to put a call option in there. Now the call option is my option. So I promise to pay you for at least 5 years, and I'm going to pay you 7.25. Now after 5 years, maybe every year after 5 years, I have a choice. So either I call it back, so I pay you back the par value, I pay you back 100, or I don't, and I just keep paying you 7.25. And I can't do that forever, okay? So the call option at least allows me, the issuer, to put an end to this trade. Now you're wondering, yeah, why would I do that? Well, I would do that if I already have a lot of money, if my bank is well capitalized. I don't want to keep paying something at 7.5%. It's very expensive, okay? So one day when I make enough money, and my bank has recovered and I'm back to good health and I don't need this instrument anymore, I will pay you back. I pay you back, and then I don't need to pay you the 7% every year anymore. So the call option is my option. Yeah. It's a good question. Commonly, convertible bonds, when you look at CBs, and we will look into this topic in a lot more detail next term with Rose K. But CB, you asked the question, which makes me want to talk a bit more. So normally, the issuer, either the issuer has the right to convert or the investor has the right to convert is how most CBs will work, okay? In this case, it is neither. The conversion is rule-based and it is automatic when a certain trigger is hit, like this one, for example, okay? Like all these. Now, these are triggers. This is when the bank's capital actually drops below a certain level of the bank's asset. That means the bank is in some kind of trouble. The conversion is automatic. So it's not up to me, the issuer, it's not up to you, the investor. It is based on a rule, which is rather unusual, okay? So you were thinking that because it's a convertible bond, someone has the right to convert. Yes, normally that's true, but not in the case of cocoa. Okay? Thank you for that question. All right, I think I better let you go. All right. And have a nice evening, and see you on Friday. And I will create that folder for the assignment. Okay. Thank you.